Tense negotiations on Capitol Hill amid growing fears of a government shutdown. And as President Trump prepares to face congressional leaders at a ceremony honoring former Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole, Republicans are floating a plan to keep the lights on past Friday's midnight deadline. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. Passions running high as Democrats hold the budget hostage for other priorities. Right now, House Republicans are testing support for another stopgap measure extending into mid-February. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders supporting the GOP effort to keep the government running.
We do support the short-term CR. However, that's not our first choice. The president certainly doesn't want to shut down. And if one happens, I think you only have one place to look, and that's to the Democrats, who are holding our military and our national security hostage by trying to push through other policies that have nothing to do with the budget.
Peter Doocy is live on Capitol Hill. Are any Democrats willing to vote for a short-term spending bill if DACA isn't addressed?
None that we know of, Dana. Democrats still want a legislative fix for DACA recipients who were brought to the country illegally as little kids by Friday at midnight. So the White House sent the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, here to the Capitol a few hours ago to meet with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus to see what kind of flexibility they might have on DACA, but it does not sound like he moved the ball.
I leave the meeting not with a great deal of optimism. I think it was a rehash of previous discussions with the General Kelly in terms of, he said it's mainly the Congress's problem to get this solved.
And just a few minutes ago, Senator Lindsey Graham, who has been working with Democrats on an immigration deal that is now stalled, started urging fellow Republicans not to ask for the moon in exchange for a DACA fix.
There was a deal to be had weeks ago. The president's heart's right on this. He wants to be fair to the DACA population. He deserves to get money for wall funding. We're not going to get comprehensive on our side just for DACA.
As of right now, though, Graham is a no on a short-term budget resolution. He says that he would only vote to keep the lights on here for another month if they could fund the military for longer or fix DACA. Dana.
So it's not just the Democrats who are trying to figure this out at the end. And what are Republicans holding over Democrats' heads right now to try to prevent the shutdown?
Dana, Republicans are saying that if Democrats vote against this, then they are also voting against Pentagon funding, and they are voting against an extension for 6 years of the Children's Health Insurance Program.
The newest member of this body, the junior senator from Alabama, campaigned on this very issue. As senator-elect, he insisted that his future colleagues should, quote, stop playing political football with the health care of our children.
And now conservatives in the House Freedom Caucus are threatening to stop this stopgap measure because they are concerned that if it gets pushed to next month and they have to deal with a year-long budget and DACA all at once, it's going to be harder to get what they want on immigration. Dana.
Right. Very interesting, Peter. Thank you so much. And now let's bring in the anchor of Fox News Sunday, Chris Wallace. Great to have you on the program. Chris, let me show you. This is the Republican funding plan. They want to fund the government through February 16th. There's that 6-year extension of the Children's Health Insurance Program, a 2-year delay of the medical device tax, and then a delay on the Cadillac tax on high-cost health insurance plans. You'll have to. I know Groundhog's Day isn't until February 2nd, but it feels like we're kind of living it now.
This would be the fourth CR since September, when government funding ran out and we started the new fiscal year. As I say, this would be the fourth time that we've kicked the can down the road, a month or 3 weeks or whatever. And there's frustration on both sides. I mean, one of the points you heard there from Peter Doocy, I mean, you can talk about the Democrats and their frustration because they want to get a DACA deal, and they worry that if they wait till closer to when DACA would be completely rescinded under the president's order in March, that they have less leverage. There are a lot of Republicans who don't want to vote for this either because they want to see funding, full funding, busting through the spending caps under sequestration for the Pentagon, and they don't want to see that continue on for another month. Their friends at the Pentagon have been complaining about that, and I think they also worry about what happens when you get this right at the time that DACA happens. This is completely up for grabs, both among Republicans and Democrats in both the House and the Senate.
Yeah, it makes me think that they probably will have to do something short term if they're that far apart and it's Wednesday afternoon. Do you think that D.C. has threatened the shutdown so many times that it's sort of lost its impact? Have they cried wolf too many times? It's like when they say they're going to work through the weekends and they don't, and they're going to work through Christmas and they don't have to. They just keep doing this to the point that I think maybe people are desensitized to it. Well,
and forget us, the voters. I think members of Congress are desensitized. Yeah. Remember, we were in a swivet on Friday, the 22nd of December. Is this going to ruin Christmas? Are we going to all have to stay over for Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve? And they delayed it from December 22nd to January 19th. And what seems to have been accomplished in basically the last month? Nothing. Right. Nothing at all. And they just began, the top leaders in the House and Senate, Republican and Democrat, just began meeting on DACA today. So you wonder, what were they doing for the last 4 weeks?
Do you think it would be smart for the Trump administration to try to find a way to get past this constantly ending up in this cul-de-sac of the possible shutdown and funding the government? Like, is there a way that he could actually do that so that next year we're not in the same position? And then the military can plan ahead, and you don't have to worry about children's health insurance program, and stop using this as a way to actually get policy done?
Well, you know, the problem is that at a certain point you are going to have to vote on spending. A lot of people thought that the president made a bad mistake last September. I have to say I was one of them. Remember, that was just after all of the hurricanes in Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico, and a lot of folks said the Democrats can't oppose emergency relief, disaster relief funding, and that's the point at which you can force them to do a year's funding bill. And if you remember, all of the leaders, congressional leaders of both parties, met with the president and with the Treasury Secretary, and the Treasury Secretary was talking about let's do full funding, and the president interrupted and said, no, I'm going to go with Chuck and Nancy, and we'll just kick it down the road till December. That was, it's always used as a point of leverage, and it's always a question of who needs it more and who has the advantage over the other side. At this point, you know, it is so bollocksed up. Republicans really want to fund the Pentagon. Democrats really are under tremendous pressure from their voters to get a DACA fix. They've almost tied themselves into knots here, and I don't know how they get themselves out from under it. The only point I would make on this, though, Dana, is it seems to me better to keep the government going and try to work this out, because let's say you do have a shutdown, all the issues are still going to remain. Republicans are still going to want to get more funding for the Pentagon. Democrats are still going to want immigration, but now you're going to have this crisis and neither one's going to be able to fix it. It would seem to me you've got a better chance if at least the government is still going. And I would imagine if you're the White House, you would want to have something done and finished before the president gives his first State of the Union address on January 30th. It's less than 2 weeks away now, because a State of the Union, you don't just say, oh, the country's doing great. You lay out your agenda for the next year. And if this is still hanging over their heads, it's sort of going to muddy that message a bit. Well, that's the best, is that it's still hanging over their heads. I mean, there's no way they're going to be able to solve all of these problems between now and Friday midnight. So the best you can hope for is they get a continuing resolution to push it down, kick the can down the road into mid or late February. There's no way they're going to have this settled by the State of the Union. But look at it on the flip side. Let's say that the government goes into a shutdown on January 19th. Then the first anniversary of the president's inauguration, there's a government shutdown, possibility of a government shutdown during the State of the Union. Oh, yeah, that's not good. That would be a disaster. I'm going to say that is suboptimal if that were to happen. All right, Chris Wallace, thank you so much. You bet. Fox News alert: President Trump's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, now agreeing to speak with special counsel Robert Mueller's team in the Russia investigation. This comes as former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski testifies behind closed doors at the House Intelligence Committee. Our Catherine Harris joins us live from Washington. The press briefing wrapping up just moments ago. How did the White House respond to this?
Well, Dana, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said the White House was on the phone with Bannon's legal team during his closed classified testimony yesterday. And she said this was not about process, but rather executive privilege.
It's the same process that is typically followed. Sometimes they actually have a White House attorney present in the room. This time it was something that was relayed via phone, and again was following standard procedure for an instance like this, and something that will likely happen again on any other number of occasions, not just within this administration, but future administrations.
Senior Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, is calling out Steve Bannon, who spent all day on Capitol Hill in front of the committee after Bannon's attorney told lawmakers the White House directed him not to answer questions about Bannon's time in the White House or during the transition.
This was effectively a gag order by the White House, preventing this witness from answering almost any question concerning his time in the transition or the administration, and many questions even after he left the administration.
Democrats want answers about the June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russian nationals that included the president's son, son-in-law, former campaign chairman, among others, and why Bannon called it treasonous. Yesterday's 12-hour session frustrated both sides of the aisle.
The president and some of his supporters want Congress to hurry up and conclude these investigations. So do I. The best way to do that is to instruct witnesses to answer our questions instead of going through this charade of executive privilege.
Bannon will be back on the Hill tomorrow, so we'll see if it's more of the same. And on his appearance with the special counsel, that's going to be an interview, not in front of the grand jury. So that subpoena may well have been a negotiating tactic, Dana. And Catherine, we expect Mr. Lewandowski's session to be very different. Is that right? Well, he's expected on the Hill at any time this hour. And on Fox yesterday, he said he's going to answer every question.
All they've said to me is to prepare to go in and answer questions. I'm going to answer every question truthfully, honestly, to the best of my ability and to the best of my recollection. But because I have nothing to hide, I'm looking forward for this opportunity to help finally bring this to a close.
Second witness is also expected in front of the same committee today. That's transition member Rick Dearborn. Based on sources familiar with the special counsel robe, investigators explored the relationship between Dearborn and campaign aide George Papadopoulos and what he knew about how Papadopoulos was brought onto the team. As you recall, Papadopoulos pled guilty to lying to the FBI and is now cooperating with the special counsel, Dana. All right, Catherine Herridge, thank you. You're welcome. A small state contest raising major alarms for Republicans. Why Governor Scott Walker is calling last night's election a wake-up call for the GOP. Plus, a growing problem along our southern border. How a lack of manpower is threatening national security. Seeing temperatures 15 to 25 degrees below average today. This video showing snow in Spartanburg in the northern part of South Carolina. Ice closing Interstate 10 in Louisiana. The conditions also impacting Houston. The mayor sharing this message to the Texas city.
I'm asking people, please stay off the roads. Please stay off the roads. Number one, you help yourselves. Number two, you will be helping the first responders who will have to be responding to those calls. So do that.
Meanwhile, snow is starting to taper off in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic states, and we are grateful for that. A wake-up call for Republicans in rural Wisconsin. Democrats flipping a state Senate held by the GOP since 2000. Patty Schnackner last night winning a special election in a district President Trump carried by 17 points. Chris Starwalt is Fox News politics editor and editor of Halftime Report. Let me read to you what Scott Walker tweeted last night. He said, Senate District 10 special election win by a Democrat is a wake-up call for Republicans in Wisconsin. And he's not the only one thinking so. Harry Enton, our friend over at 538, said tonight's results on their own don't mean much. But in context of 80-plus state and federal legislative special elections, they're merely the latest sign the GOP is in big trouble. What do you make of that?
Well, it's true. I mean, if we look at the trend from this time a year ago or from even the 2016 election, Democrats are fired up and they're ready to go. You know, we talk a lot and people talk a lot about the way in which President Trump's base is loyal to him and in the way that when he does or says outrageous things that it gets his base fired up and that they like it. But they better remember there is an equal and opposite reaction at the other side of the political spectrum, because the things that please President Trump's populist nationalist supporters are the same things that will inflame and inspire Democrats to get out the vote and pick up seats like this, just as we saw in Virginia, just as we saw in Alabama with mitigated circumstances, but we've seen all over the country.
Do you think that would be different, though, if President Trump were out on the campaign trail, as he said he plans to do in 2018 for the midterms in November?
I don't think he could help in Wisconsin. I don't think he could help in a district like that. There are places that the White House always has to pick and choose carefully. This is true with any president, which races to play in, where to get involved.
And where to have scheduling conflicts that they can't quite make it.
Intractable scheduling conflicts.
That's right.
The Pennsylvania race where the president's going into play, that's a great one. That's a seat where he ought to be safe. He can help. It's a district race, probably very popular. So it's about picking and choosing.
What about all these Senate Democrats? Here's a list of the 10 Senate Democrats who are going to have to try to defend their seats. We've got California, Delaware, Indiana, Maryland, Minnesota, all the way across the board, including your home state of West Virginia. But the Democrats are raising a ton of money. I'm just looking at some of these totals. A lot of them have millions of dollars in the bank. But as President Trump showed us, money isn't everything if you don't have a message. How do you think the Democrats are shaping up?
Well, money isn't everything unless you don't have enough. There's a threshold number in every political race where you reach supersaturation, where there's so much money in there it doesn't really matter. You can't change it anymore. And in all of the key Senate races, look, we're tracking 13, maybe 15 Senate races right now. I expect that number will shrink. In all of the key races, there's going to be more than enough money on either side. Nobody's going to be able to walk away with this because of fundraising. All right.
Well, do you know how I know it's really cold in D.C.?
I got the sweater on?
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen you actually wear a sweater and a jacket. That must mean it's cold.
I'm getting that professor vibe flowing.
All right. Thanks, Chris. And we'll see you later this hour to talk about Bob Dole being honored at the Capitol.
You bet.
President Trump calling for more Border Patrol agents, with the agency already having a hard time keeping staff. What's causing the vacancies? And we are just days away from a government shutdown. What is standing in the way of a deal? Our panel is here to discuss. The Border Patrol facing a manpower crisis. The feds now putting the word out after years of losing agents twice as fast as it can hire new ones. The CBP hiring?
CBP is hiring.
It's a good career, right?
It is a very good career. We're looking for 5,000 Border Patrol agents, 500 Air and Marine, and additional customs officers. People can go to cbp.gov, the careers page, and they can see what the opportunities are.
And there are opportunities. William LaJeunesse joins me, all of us from Nogales on the Arizona-Mexico border. William.
Well, and there are challenges, as you know, Dana. You know, the border is 2,000 miles long, but only about 20% of it is a pedestrian fence like this. Now, the agency says this works. It reduces illegal immigration. But right now, the challenge is hiring the manpower to back it up.
The extreme nature appealed to me. Where I'm from is pretty flat.
Raised in a small Indiana town, Stephen Engels joined the Border Patrol 2 years ago.
Stopping people from crossing the border and the secondary aspect of stopping narcotics, all of that appealed to me.
After 6 months at the academy, which included deadly force training, the agency sent Engels to Nogales, Arizona.
It doesn't matter why they crossed or for what purpose they came here. What they did was illegal, and we're paid to uphold the law.
Finding the next Engels is a challenge for the Border Patrol. Starting salary of an agent, $49,000. The patrol is down 1,800 agents, and the president wants 5,000 more. 65% fail the polygraph. Hiring one agent takes 133 applicants and 9 months.
In many cases, we are going after the same applicants that a lot of law enforcement agencies are.
Hiring new agents is one problem. Keeping experienced ones is another.
It is an employment crisis. We're losing more agents than we're hiring.
We've got to get better at looking at different retention initiatives.
Manpower, technology, fencing. Since 2001, Homeland Security doubled the number of agents and added almost 700 miles of pedestrian and vehicle barriers, mostly in Tucson and Yuma, El Centro, and San Diego. Apprehensions fell by more than 90%.
So it reduced the amount of traffic, the flow, migration, and drugs that was coming across the border.
So if Congress does appropriate more money, expect a longer wall, resources for a better access road or more access road, and then, of course, the bonuses necessary for hiring or retention to hit that magic number of 27,000 agents as the president wants.
Yeah, and
Dana,
a good way to
back
serve
you.
the country as well. And I think it could be a really good career for a lot of people. So thanks for bringing us that report, William. Appreciate it. A former American spy now under arrest. What the one-time CIA agent is accused of doing to help China. Plus, is the government headed for a shutdown this weekend as both sides blame each other? Our panel will weigh in.
We are trying to get a deal to solve the DACA problem, but we don't want to shut down the government. This is not the way Congress is supposed to work. They're supposed to have a funding bill completed by September 30th. We're now in mid-January.
As we face a possible government shutdown Friday, the last time it happened was in 2013 during the Obama administration. The impasse lasted a full 16 days. The primary reason for the shutdown was a disagreement over money for Obamacare. Polls at the time showed a majority of Americans thought both parties were to blame. So can lawmakers avoid a shutdown this time? Well, both sides are already pointing the finger at each other, looking to assign blame.
There's no cause whatsoever for manufacturing a crisis. I find it difficult to believe that my Democratic colleagues would want to shut down the government for American citizens and vote down a 6-year reauthorization of health insurance for American children, all over illegal immigration.
If, God forbid, there's a shutdown, it will fall on the majority leader's shoulders and the president's shoulders. We all know what the president has said. He wants a shutdown.
With me now, former Utah Congressman and Fox News contributor Jason Chaffetz, and Juan Williams, Fox News political analyst and one of my co-hosts on The Five. Jason, you've been here before. Do you think that there will be a shutdown or that there might be a deal?
I think there will be a deal. I mean, you're talking about a short-term continuing resolution, just over a month. I think the deal has really been sweetened by the CHIP funding. I think Democrats won't be able to resist that. They will flail right up until the very last moment, but I think ultimately a deal gets done. Congress operates on a time crunch.
So, Juan, are these threats of a shutdown just empty? Just ways to try to get things to kick the can down the road at one point?
Well, they've already had 2 continuing resolutions in December, Dana, and I think what you're seeing now is the Republicans realizing that they are likely to get the blame since they control both houses of the Congress and, of course, the White House. And so what we're really dealing with at the moment is Republicans making a deal so that conservative Republicans who were reluctant to sign on are going to sign on, largely because of what former Congressman Chaffetz just told you, that they're getting some of the concessions they wanted from Republican leadership.
And yet, listen to what Representative Mac Thornberry said about military spending.
You can come up with the best strategy in the world, but Congress has got to put the money behind it. We've got to build the military that will deal with all those threats. And right now, there's political games going on in this building that is not adequately funding our military.
So, Jason, I want to ask you about that because we bump up against these shutdowns all the time. And I don't think anybody wants the military not to have what it needs, but it's extremely hard to plan ahead if you can't actually have the money in the budget so that you can look to, get the contracts and the best possible price and all the other things that we need for the readiness. What do you think about that argument from the Republican side?
Yeah, you can't flip on and off this switch, every few months when you're expecting weapon systems funding for troops and their pay. You just can't do that. It is unfair to the military. But we are talking about a plus-up of some $80 billion. It's not a trivial amount. We're going to spend an all-time record amount of money on discretionary spending, north of $1.2 trillion. What's frustrating to me when I was in Congress, and I think it's frustrating now, is vote. I mean, I think the Goodlatte-McCall bill on immigration, put it up for a vote. Let's see where we're at on these things. But all too often, Congress, leadership tries to make these deals behind the scene instead of actually voting. Put these things up for a vote.
Do you think that Democrats would want that, Juan? Like, let's have the vote, see where everybody is, even if it's not going to pass, just figure out what the baseline is?
Well, I think it would open the door to negotiations because if you have a baseline, then you can have a sense of where concessions and deals need to be made. So I don't think that would be a problem. But the larger issue is if you are in charge, if you are the speaker, for example, you don't want defeats. You don't want to give leverage to people who are then going to make demands and potentially embarrass you because the bill would be a failure. So it's intra-party negotiation that we're talking about and saving face. But from the Democrats' point of view also, I think they have higher priorities and think that President Trump has simply been saying it's a matter of the dreamers versus the military, and nobody's trying to deny funds to the military.
All right, well, take a look at this, too, because we're talking about blame and who would get the blame in a shutdown and would it actually matter. But things are looking up a little bit for the Republicans. The Gallup poll just out talking about the tax law. Before the bill passed, it had a 29% approval, 56% disapprove. But after it's passed, 33% approve, 55% disapprove. So the numbers are improving for Republicans as people start to learn a little bit more about it. And I think, Jason, they're anticipating that they might have more money in their own pockets.
Yeah, I think when they start to see the checks come in February and March, and they see that there really is going to be a difference, and by the time they get to April and start to realize, okay, this is what happened last year, this is what happens next year, it is going to be a much better situation. Again, Republicans can help blow that up and destroy it by doing some silly stuff, but at the same time, it is going to make life better for America, and most Americans are going to see a real difference in their pocketbooks.
And the Quinnipiac poll just out today won. 66% of Americans describe the state of the economy as excellent or good, and that is up, 3 points since December, when it was at 63%. So it's kind of going in the right direction for Republicans right now, who are hoping that the economics continue to help match their rhetoric and that they would be able to run on tax reform and scare people into thinking that the Democrats might try to overturn that. How are the Democrats going to try to push back on that?
Well, I think that, when you look at those numbers you were talking about in terms of improved appreciation for the tax bill, it's 33%. That means like 2/3 of Americans still don't approve of that bill. The consumer confidence and the approval remains very high, but I think Democrats still feel and you look at what happened in Wisconsin yesterday, Democrats feel that, we can make a very strong case that the rich got rewarded here, not President Trump's forgotten man and woman.
All right. Well, thank you both joining me today, Jason Chaffetz and Juan Williams.
You're welcome.
We'll be back with you soon. And he used to work for the CIA. Now he's under arrest, suspected of spying for China. Doug McElway is live in Washington. Doug, how bad is the damage from this CIA leak? I read the stories this morning. It was shocking.
Yeah, it is shocking. It's bad. The FBI affidavit in question suggests it was really bad. It says the disclosure of this information could cause, quote, exceptionally grave damage to the national security of the United States. And the New York Times went further, saying the collapse of the spy network was one of the American government's worst intelligence failures in recent years. And there may be more. Here's Ed O'Callahan's Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General at today's White House briefing.
As that case proceeds through the courts, I would expect that more information about the conduct that underlies those charges in the complaint will come out.
The case has been under investigation since at least 2012. That's when retired CIA agent Jerry Chun-Shing Lee traveled back to the United States and to Virginia from his new home in Hong Kong with a 3-day stopover in Honolulu, Hawaii. In Hawaii and in Virginia, FBI agents armed with search warrants accessed his hotel rooms, searched through his suitcases, and photographed 2 small notebooks with handwritten entries containing top-secret information, including the locations, the telephone numbers, and the real names of CIA informants and undercover agents working across China. It appears that that information was provided to Chinese authorities, who then began the process of disassembling the entire CIA U.S. human intelligence network across China. And we've heard that as many as 20 people may have been arrested, perhaps as many as 10 of them were executed, some of them publicly.
Well, here's one thing I didn't understand in reading it. Maybe you can clear it up for me. Why did authorities wait so long to arrest him when they knew that he was what he was up to as much as 6 years ago?
Yeah, that's a question that former CIA Director John Brennan could perhaps answer. He was in charge of the agency at the time much of this was going on. We can only speculate. But former CIA agent Peter Brooks, now at Heritage, offers this insight.
The best way to find out about spies in your midst is to recruit a spy from another service, from the adversary service.
We know that the FBI had begun its investigation of Lee in 2012, but the arrest was made just 2 days ago. So it's been 6 years, and Lee must have known that he was being closely watched because the FBI had 5 meetings with him between May and June of 2013, during which he never acknowledged he had those notebooks with the classified information on it. So he's now being held in a Brooklyn jail, and he may be a prime source to reveal more information about the Chinese spies networks here in the United States and what he knew about what was going on in China.
Maybe they might have had good reason not to arrest him. Maybe they were tracking him. I'm not one to judge. I'm just curious. All right, Doug McElway, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Let's take a live look at Capitol Hill as the president is heading there soon to recognize former Majority Leader Bob Dole, along with congressional leaders from both sides. We'll bring that to you live. Plus, the House Freedom Caucus threatening to block a short-term spending bill to avoid shutting down the government this weekend.
We're not making any demands. We're just trying to set out our preferences. And I think that the conference will be caught between being pragmatic and what they believe the Senate will take.
Shepard Smith on the Fox News deck, about to witness a special moment and a change of pace up on Capitol Hill. A live look here. President Trump, Vice President Pence, lawmakers from both parties coming together to honor Bob Dole, the longtime Republican Senate leader and former presidential nominee, set to receive the Congressional Gold Medal. It is the highest civilian honor that Congress can give. We'll look at Senator Dole's service to the nation on Capitol Hill and during World War II. We're expected to hear from the president himself, plus lawmakers from both parties and from Senator Dole. This ceremony to begin at the top of the hour on Shepard Smith Reporting. We'll have it for you uninterrupted by commercials. Hope to see you then.
How is your agreement likely to be different from the deal that was already struck by a bipartisan group of senators? Why not use that as a starting point?
Well, at the risk of being repetitious, I'm looking for something that President Trump supports. And he's not yet indicated what measure he's willing to sign. As soon as we figure out what he is for, then I would be convinced that we were not just spinning our wheels going to this issue on the floor, but actually dealing with a bill that has a chance to become law and therefore solve the problem.
That's Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell moments ago on a potential immigration deal that could be the key to avoiding a government shutdown on Friday night. Let's talk about it with Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Congressman, President Trump just arrived on Capitol Hill. He'll be attending that ceremony for Bob Dole, and I know you will be too, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what was Mitch McConnell just saying? Is he saying that the White House needs to tell the Congress what he is willing to sign so that they could figure out a deal that they should pass?
Yeah, we're getting to the 11th hour here, and unfortunately the issue of DACA has been married up with government funding. I'm supportive of keeping the government open. I'm supportive of fixing the DACA issue, but these deadlines have been tied up, and I think what we're trying to say is if the president can show us what he's willing to do. We know about this bipartisan group that went to him and said, here's our plan. I frankly don't know all the details of that plan, but if he's willing to say, okay, I'm on board with that, that's what I want to sign, I think that would fire through Congress pretty quick, and frankly it would have the support of the vast majority of the American people, but we're not there right now, so we'll see.
All right, well, you'll have to keep us posted. We were just watching the president walk in, headed to the hall where they will have that ceremony for Bob Dole. Just moments ago, he also did an interview with Reuters, and he said that Russia is not helping us at all with North Korea. What China is helping us with, Russia is denting. In other words, Russia is making up for some of what China is doing. What do you think about that? Because we're getting also some somewhat encouraging news from the region that people are happy that the North and the South are talking. But if the sanctions aren't working, that might be just fruitless.
Yeah, so look, this idea of the North and South talking, I'm fine with. That's, anytime we can explore that, it's great. Where we have to be cautious is North Korea's experts at using situations like this to buy time. Maybe they have to make some technological advances that they're doing and basically putting the West off guard. We're absolutely eager to avoid any kind of a military conflict, so in doing that, we're going to lash out at any sign of, a joint Olympic team or whatever and embrace that. The reality is, trust me, Kim Jong-un did not make a decision in the last few weeks that he doesn't want nuclear weapons. weapons. He's still striving for that. The Chinese are doing better. We know that the vast majority of trade goes over the Chinese border. They can shut it all down if they want to. The Russians are a problem. And again, the Russians, anybody who thinks Russia is any kind of an ally just needs to look at the fact that they love keeping America on their toes and would accept a despot like Kim Jong-un in order to do that.
All right. Well, and also Assad, in the Middle East.
And Assad,
right.
Assad, who's killed 50,000
right.
children, including with the use of chemical weapons.
Right. Let me ask you about the ceremony that's about to take place. Former Senator Bob Dole will be getting the Congressional Medal of Honor. It is the highest civilian honor that anybody can get. He was the first person I met in 1995 when I was getting a tour of the Capitol before I started my job in a House congressional office, and he invited me out to his balcony for a Diet Coke, and he was always kind to me. He always remembered me, and what a special person he was. Your thoughts before the ceremony today?
Look, he's a politician of an era, unfortunately, that's gone by that I'd love to see back again, where we can actually treat each other with respect, where we can have these brutal disagreements, but at the end of the day have a beer together and respect each other's differences in opinion. And that was Bob Dole. And I love that legacy. I hope in honoring that today, we don't just say, hey, we're honoring a good man. We look at that and say, he is the roadmap or a blueprint of how all of us as politicians should strive to be in the future.
And then for you, who also had served in the military, what about that angle for this? I mean, this is a moment to also reflect on the amazing and heroic work and service that he provided to the country before he came back to serve in the Congress.
Yeah, think about this. This is, that generation that served in Congress. And by the way, we're building a new generation like that of people that are post 9/11 veterans. I was the second post 9/11 veteran in Congress. First was Duncan Hunter. Now we have a ton of us coming in here. So we're building, in essence, that kind of post World War II where they all came back from the war. They were able to disagree without being disagreeable. So when you look at Bob Dole's service, it's a man that gave not just in the military a massive amount to his country, then came back and did it in civil service. All of us in our own way, whether we're in government service or not, should strive to be just even an ounce of what he's been able to do in his life.
Yeah, well, Fox News is going to take the ceremony live so that everybody can get a chance to see Senator Bob Dole get this amazing honor. Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, thanks so much.
You bet. Say hey to Jasper for me. Take
care. Lawmakers and the president getting ready to honor Bob Dole. Chris Starwell will be back to talk about the legacy of the former Senate Majority Leader. Stay by.
With